Hassan needs to fake his death and join WITSEC. Needs to 5150 Ethan and put him in a room. Crazy. Just so it's clear, your community as a content creator is very much a reflection of you and what you allow. The cope that I will hear from certain communities where they like have known doxers in there and they're like chumming with like doxers or swatters and like just straight up like internet harassers and stuff. And they're like, I mean, they're just allowed to hang out here. That's concerning. That should be concerning to you because your community is absolutely a reflection of you. And there is a decent level of responsibility that you have for your community. Now, if you go above and beyond to make sure that your community doesn't do certain things, and then they continue to do so, I think you have more, but you have more levels of credit, levels of distance. There we go. Not firing on my best today. Not good. But like 5150'd, like this being all over, this should be, yeah, not good. This is crazy. Rhetoric has consequences. I mean, it really, really does. I mean, I think even if you just spend a lot of time as a large content creator hate posting about another content creator, the reality is that while it doesn't mean that you're yes-manning doxing, you are culpable to some degree. You just are culpable to some degree. If anyone in the community finds out that you're participating in doxing, you should be banned everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Obviously, like random incidences will occur, but also like watching the way that you react when you find out like one of your community members potentially was like promoting and aggressing towards CPS calling your enemies. There should be some level of like, oh fuck. I would be shocked to find out that Pokemon's community has like notorious, ruthless, horrible doxers. I'd be shocked to find that out. It may be the case, but I suspect that behavior gets curbed. I think that in general, the mods are pretty tight on like shit talking other creators on her platform, that you can't just like say insane shit. You can't say super racist shit. And so while I agree that there should be platform wide, I don't know what the platform wide policy should be is, I don't even know. I guess my question would be, what platform-wide policy could be implemented to prevent individual communities amassing more doxing and swatting and raiding behavior? Because raiding, for example, is not allowed on Twitch or anything. If they find out that you're raiding, intentionally, like maliciously directing your viewers to other people, you'll get banned, which I think is good, by the way. I think it's bad to raid. And you might be like, well, this friend of yours or this person did raiding. Yeah, believe it or not, I thought it was bad. Can you go into that culpability? I tend to find over moderation a little authoritarian. Obviously, bad behavior should be discouraged and anything should be illegal should be ousted. The moderation within the community that I'm talking about, and maybe my focus on that is because that's the only thing I have control of. Maybe I'm biasing this, as that chatter pointed out, because the thing that I think a lot about is my own personal community moderation. And the question of culpability that I'm thinking about here. Hold on, I need to pull up your chat so I can reread it. To define over moderation, a little authoritarian, obviously, but bad behavior should be discouraged and anything like, yeah. So I think there's like obvious moderation. I think if you find any content creator who isn't saying things like doxing is bad and I ban people who dox, I'd be shocked. Almost everyone does that. The issue that I actually think is more of the problem that at least a single content creator has and that they have control of would be things like the energy that they have around harassment. So for example, if you find out that a senator that you dislike does something and people start joking about like murking them and you kind of like laugh and shrug your shoulders, there's a little bit of an implicit like okayness about that. And I think you have to be really, really cautious, right? All of this stuff is really tricky to moderate because it's implicit, subtle, cultural zeitgeist shifts within your own community. I'm not thinking too deep because this stuff is really complex. You're not thinking deep enough. this is the fundamental of social engineering. You're trying to figure out a way where community has some level of free speech. They're allowed to exist with their various differences, but also you're finding a way to make it socially uncouth to have too much like wrath, rage, or otherwise malicious language and intent toward others within your community or outside of your community. At this point, the FCC might need to crack down on Google and Amazon over the doxing. I think the doxing swatting problem is probably multivariate, right? There's platform level issues that I think is beyond even Twitch. I think it's like internet safety bill level. Like I don't know what these platforms do to mitigate some of it without IP addresses being bannable, or with VPNs that exist, or with internet anonymity. But for example, in general, when like I have guests on, or when other content creators have guests on, the amount of hatred that they allow their audience to have is something to pay attention to. So the problem is that none of this is like an easy, simple line. I mean, like, oh, they let people say mean things about you in their chat. Well, they probably are fine with doxing. That's obviously not true, right? But if you go into a space and you share a platform with somebody and their chat is really, really nasty all the time, and when you bring it up to the content creator, for example, they're reticent in addressing it, not good. If you say people are making, say you're in a chat and you are a Black woman and people keep on making pretty weird low-hanging comments about you being Black and you being a woman, and that keeps repeating on and on and on. First of all, ideally the streamer notices it themselves and they curb it, but they can't, which is why they have moderators. So hopefully at least the moderators would know that the streamer would want that curbed, and they curb it. And say it's in an instant where genuinely that just, they pass through, they don't notice it. The next step is if that person comes to you and they go, there's a lot of really weird comments about like me being Black and me being a woman, like just a lot. And it's always in like the Schrodinger's meme territory. They're always just joking, but it's like, it's just a little much. I think at that point, moderators have to like start looking at that, and if it's like pretty constant, if, 8 out of 10 Black members in your community or Asian members. I'm picking Black just because it's an intersection we can pick easily. Asian members are there and people keep on making eating dog jokes. And then the person starts going like, I don't really feel comfortable about this. At that point, like if this was my community, I would probably opt for a verbal pushback against that person or encourage our mods to do so, right? So if you see that joke again, say that Asian person posts and that person, or maybe those collective of people, again, just post like another dog eating joke, I would probably do like a soft pushback if I were a mod or myself and be like, man, you're really loving them racist jokes. Maybe time to chill, right? I'd do something really soft like that. And if the behavior curbs, done, right? But what happens in some communities is they say, just tough it out. The internet's mean. And it's like, you can allow that in your community. You can say, okay, well, my community is just a little bit mean. You're just going to get like racist jokes all the time. You can choose to do that, but now you're treading increasingly into dangerous territory. And this is why like none of this is obvious. None of this is easy to make rules around, because I don't think a really edgy community that's all kind of consenting to like nasty jokes is inherently bad and therefore full of doxers and stalkers and shit like that. They're just edgy internet posters. But the problem is how the mods and the streamer all react every time maybe something goes a little too far or one person feels a little bit sensitive. And it's tricky, right? Because you can't take it on one instance, because sometimes people will come up to the mods or to the streamers and they'll be sensitive and they'll be like, yeah, this is not something we care about here. Like, I'm sorry, it's like one joke. You kind of have to get over it. I get that. I have a decently edgy Discord myself, right? And so as somebody who has this community, it's really hard to string that balance of allowing a certain level of edginess and toughness that is more common in the internet streaming space specifically, balanced with not allowing. What you don't want is for people who are naturally antisocial and have a pretty strong predilection to enjoying antisocial behavior to feel not just like safe to do so, to be like a little bit antisocial in your community, but increasingly become like high level power chatters and culture setters, right? So like our community had an issue with this where we had a couple of individuals that were very funny, but also really antisocial, particularly around like a couple of people groups. And there was a really difficult thing where at first the moderation was talking to them, and then it was asking them to stop. Then it was banning them from certain chats. Then it was timing them out more and more. Then it was banning them for a week at the time, until essentially we got to this point of being like, they're too antisocial. They're really charismatic. So they pull people into their antisociality and encourage others who would otherwise not be like this to engage in that behavior. They just have to go at this point. I think you should define antisocial. When I say antisocial, I mean mean, nasty, unempathetic, and like actively taking some level of delight in doing harm or causing distress to others, right? So pranks, you can do fun pranks or antisocial pranks. An antisocial prank, I can't even think of one off the top of my head, but it would be somebody that most of us would look around and be like, oh, fuck, like that's kind of mean. But the problem is that if you have a really high charisma, somewhat antisocial power chatter leader, they can normalize it and laugh at it, and people enjoy it because it is somewhat fun. And so what I mean by antisocial is essentially anti the group, taking delight in causing distress to others, and then particularly in a community, when asked to stop, lean in further to that antisociality. And it can be very concerning. For example, I think any fringe group has higher risk of having more antisocial people in it because a lot of antisocial people are often part of fringe culture groups, right? So the goth punk scene, for example, was inundated with a whole bunch of antisocial individuals. And when I say, sorry, I guess I'll pull it up. Somebody who is averse or hostile to society. They tend to be very disruptive, harmful. They violate social norms a lot. So when I'm saying antisocial, I mean it in like kind of the clinical sense, just to be super clear. I fucking love taking delight in suffering, right? And we all do a little bit. When you see that bitch that you've hated for like 7 years, like trip and fall or get like broken up with or like have people turn on her, there's a party that's like, yeah, fuck yeah, right? Because it feels good when we think people who are just deserving get their just desserts. But in a community where groupthink can begin to emerge, that has to be managed really, really closely. And I think a lot of subversive subcultures get taken over by antisocial, probably high charisma, narcissistic leaders, right? And so you've got like punk scenes. Punk is just like mostly music and aesthetic. But the reality in the 90s is that a lot of antisocial people started to move towards the punk scene. And there were problems within the scene, even though not every single punk person delighted in causing suffering and doing crime and, you know, damaging property of others and stuff like that. But it began to emerge more and more until the less antisocial punk scene members probably pulled away, and increasingly all of society started like shaming and cracking down on the punk scene. And this happens in all sorts of kind of more subversive communities. So I think Hassan's community is a really good example of a group that would be very, very hard to moderate well. And when I say moderate, again, I should, if you guys have a word for this, that's better. I don't just mean if you dox your band, because I'm sure that Hassan and his community have like the obvious rules. It's the social milieu zeitgeist that takes over. Are the power chatters and the cool people in your community of moral conduct? Do they believe in treating others well and kindly? Or are they more popular and cool because they're nasty to other people? Is your most popular people, like Frogan's one of his top mods, she's pretty fucking mean to most people and seems to delight in being kind of nasty towards people. That's now setting a cultural kind of milieu zeitgeist for your community about not only what's okay, but also what types of behavior can help you climb the social train, right? Which, what that does, why I'm thinking so deep about this, is that this is how people get pulled deeper and deeper into like radicalism to some degree. So if you have somebody who's a high charisma, high status person, that begins to set a social norm, and to climb towards that person, you start engaging in increasingly antisocial behavior. The whole group increasingly will move towards some level of antisociality. Now, to be clear, in my understanding, I believe that Hassan's community has some hard lines, which is good, right? But this is why when you're like moderating a community, a lot of times when I think about a community and like how to view it, and I don't just mean even online, I'm thinking about like treatment centers, because there's a milieu and a cultural zeitgeist that emerges. And it's one of the hardest things to manage. When I was working at the women's volunteer facility, right? It's just usually 12 to 13 women and their kids. Going back to the addiction center, one of the things that we noticed is that we would have like these 3-month arcs, basically, where, because we kind of let people in. Typically with the treatment facility we were in, most women would stay from 6 months to 9 months, but 3 months was one of the most common times that people left, though usually we would say they left early. Thank you for the subs, by the way. How do you successfully move away from that dynamic once entrenched? That's a really good question. And it's actually easier. It's easier than you think it is. It really is, especially in communities where there is a major front face individual that pulls everyone together, especially like in streamer communities. I actually think the solution to this is broadly pretty easy, except for the extremist stuff. You can never fully manage the extremist stuff. So, in this milieu, because remember, there's moderation. Think about moderation and community creating like a sketch. When you sketch something, oh, should we get paint? Let's get some paint, okay? I haven't painted in a while. Let's get on this. Alrighty, we're gonna first of all dye it dark so you guys don't burn your eyeballs out. When you're building a community, the way that I think about it and the way that I've learned, by the way, this is just my perspective from working in like treatment centers and stuff. So you might disagree. Also, I'm a bad artist. Just want to start that out. Your Instagram link is dead, by the way. Yeah, I know. I updated it. I haven't kept things on top. Sorry. You kind of have, to start off, you have like structures, okay? And these would be really obvious verbatim policies. So in this structure, you might have something like, say we've got a streamer community, you know, doxing is a bannable offense, okay? That might be like one policy that you establish. And then another policy that you might establish would be like racial slurs are banned. Okay. What's another policy that you might have within a streaming community? Going full Dr. K. I could just look at mine. Hold on. I got policies. So in my community, we have moderation principles and goals. Those are like our hard lines. So, so hard rules. Okay. No doxing. Already got that. Let's say, in here we'll do no corn. You guys understand what that means, right? Because I'm on YouTube as well. Your chat rules, no slurs, no spam, no go to my account, no sexually explicit offers or advances. Yeah, okay. So here we go. Here are some explicit rules, okay? And so a lot of people, when they think moderation, they're thinking exclusively about explicit rules, right? So in the treatment center, we've got things like no substance use on site, right? We have children on site at this substance use place. You cannot have substance use while children are on site. We might have something like must attend classes unless otherwise excused, because we had like, it was like an intensive live-in patient thing. Another rule might be something like no abuse, violence, or disrespect toward others. So these are like the firm rules, right? And so when people think about moderation, they think about these firm rules. The problem that you get into, to get into the grays, is first of all, what does disrespect mean, right? What is disrespect? Because what I think is disrespectful and you think is disrespectful varies. So this can get really, violence is pretty obvious. If you hit a staff member, you're going to get nuked. Disrespect, that's really tough. Even something like abuse, emotional abuse, or psychological abuse can be really tricky to know when that's occurring, right? It can be, especially not just to know it's occurring, because I think when you watch these things, you can kind of suss out of like watching and being like, this seems abusive. What's actually difficult to figure out is how to put that onto paper and go, this is explicitly where the abuse line has started. And now we're at the intolerable, you can't be in the center anymore, right? Because in the center, so in my community, if you violate these policies, you're gone, right? You're gone from the community. So the communities have like these hard lines, but what people don't realize is that everything in between is milieu. It's all milieu. So milieu just means like social, I'm going to look up the, oh, I spelled it wrong. So close. A social environment. That's a good way. Okay. Social environment. I know this is really hard to read. Okay. Social environment. And so what determines your social environment is a couple of things. Let's talk about stream social environment. Well, one of the biggest things that determine your social environment is the streamer, right? If I normalized making fun of fat people, and every time there was a fat person on stream, I made some sort of comment. And if we had like overweight guests, for example, and their nasty comments, I didn't clap down on those, but I would clap down on other negative comments. All of a sudden, within the social milieu, particularly in regards to disrespect, if say that was part of my rule as a streamer, is don't disrespect others. Well, unless they're fat, then it seems like the streamer is a little bit more okay with that, right? So part of the social environment is obviously from the streamer, but not exclusively, because there will be things that occur in somebody's community, especially as a streaming community gets larger, that the streamer doesn't approve of. That they're like, why are people doing this? I'm not okay with, like, most streamers are normal enough people to be like, yeah, don't harass other people on my behalf. But it still occurs, right? So the streamer is one part of it. Right. And the streamer is complex because you've got reactions, right? You've got stated values. You've got their ideology, right? They're just their broad worldview. You've also got their content, right? So certain content creators have to be more permissive of certain things. If you're a political free speecher, you have to be a lot more permissive of certain behaviors than if you're a baking channel that doesn't do politics, right? If you're a baking channel that doesn't do politics, you can just make a really simple rule that says no politics, and you can just avoid a lot of messy stuff, at least from politics. Right. So you've got the streamer. Then you've also got to have things like mods. That's what mods are for, right? And mods are complicated because ideally they get their direction from the streamer. But the rules that mods will have is going to vary on streamers. So my mods are people. So I have rules about how I moderate people that I've just figured out works really well. I don't moderate anyone who asks for it. Almost everyone who asks for mod tends to want to have some level of power, which often leads to bad situations, bad moderation calls. Second of all, I always back my mods, which is why I try to be really cautious about who I mod. So third of all, I try to select mods who I think embody the moral characteristics that I want my community to have, right? And my moral characteristics would be tries to be good faith, is firm on certain like explicit behaviors that are not okay, just like nukes it hardcore, and pushes back against people being bad faith, and by and large tries to hear other people's positions. The next person that's really important for determining a social culture would be something like power chatters. Power chatters are not mods. They are people that come into your community that are high charisma. Okay. They're the bards. They're the bards. They're the sorcerers. They're the people that come in and they're just good yappers. They're interesting. They bring up interesting conversations, right? They tend to elicit a lot of activity, and you'll always know in a community who's a power chatter. And this is both in person and online, by just kind of watching dynamics. So if somebody enters a chat, like a voice chat, and a whole bunch of extra people start coming in, it's a good cue that that's either an important mod the streamer, because that'll happen, or it's a power chatter, right? If they're not a mod or the streamer, then they're a power chatter. That's why they're staying there. The Thrizzlers, yes, Thrizzlers, the Yapaholics indeed. Another thing that you'll notice to determine if somebody is a power chatter is, say you're in a social setting, like in a group. First of all, if they start talking, everyone in the group is more likely to start listening to them. If they interrupt, people yield the talking space to them. And if they start talking at the same time as others, most will often defer to letting them to speak first. So they've very much earned a lot of social capital and social power within the group. So you can see why these individuals are super important. They're just as important as mods in my mind, because while the mods are instilling a lot of values, they're also very much bent to this stuff. They're spending a lot of time banning the obvious bad behavior. Whereas the power chatters are the people that are really important for determining the social milieu. In fact, if you look at, for example, Destiny and Vosh, for example, Vosh is an example of a power chatter who grew up, got so much power in the community that when him and Destiny finally had a disagreement and they split, Vosh was able to pull a large portion of the community. Not just because of the politics, but also probably there's a lot of people that liked Vosh, A, because they preferred him politically, but B, they liked him socially. Hassan's very much the same in the Destiny situation. It's hard to enter space with already determined power chatters. It's very hard, especially if the culture of the power chatters is not to be super welcoming, right? That's why you have to be really careful. And so a lot of communities think about moderation. They focus on their mods, bannable rules, and they focus on all this structure stuff. But I think a lot of communities don't attend very much to the power chatter. But I think the power chatter is just as important as the mod because they determine all of the stuff in between. And so if you have a power chatter who you allow to maintain in the community, who is kind of antisocial, who seems to somewhat revel at nastiness, they seem to enjoy being cruel to other people, they're going to pull people who otherwise wouldn't have that behavior in that direction of behavior because it's cool. All right. That was like a 30-minute segment. Why am I still getting abs if I'm sad? I don't know. I'm so sorry. Twitch man, okay? It's rough. So anyways, those of you who rated it, you know, I hope you enjoyed that.